All right, we got Mars in the fourth house today. So Mars in the fourth house, we got Mars, the planet of action. Not just any action; it's like decisive action. Your gut instinct. Following your gut instinct. Are you one that does that, or do you question that shit before you move? Depending on the sign, that's what it does, right? And then the fourth house, that's your home life, that's your private life, that's your, you know, connection to your mother in your past, right? That type of past, your childhood past. So we're gonna put that together. How you're moving through your childhood. Then how it moves into how you move through your um adult life too, because it had a profound impact on you. So this first person is Aries, Mars in the fourth house. So this is a go-getter type. They're like, I want to do this, I'll do this. They were kind of a bratty kid, I guess. You know, very rowdy, energetic. You know, when they got pissed off, they would like fight their siblings and shit like that, right? Maybe even like run their mouths through their parents, and they got the belt. But these people, right? You had that in you, and you're like, I gotta like do this. I can't wait. Your mom didn't probably hate you, but she cared a lot about you. See, she knew that there was, for a kid to be doing shit like that, it's not time for you to be that guy yet, or that girl, so, don't be too aggressive. And, she would always try to calm you the fuck down and bring you in that way, um, because she cared about your safety. Now, you might have thought, she thought you were weak or thought you were not knowing what you wanted to do, but she actually knew that you wanted to, to do. Maybe she didn't though. Some people's mothers ain't so cool, right? But you know, I would imagine that she did. But you had that internal instinct, and you were like, "No, mom, I don't give a fuck. I need to go, and I need to meet these people. I need to break this guy's neck. I gotta, I gotta, compete in these sports. I cannot fucking wait to, find these fucking people to be friends with, you know." But you had that chaotic, bringing that chaos to the house, and it was you doing it. Um, but because of that, you didn't mind leaving and shit. When it was time to leave, you weren't upset. You were like, I'm out of here. I've been waiting for this shit for like my whole life. And you were, out. You know, After that, you were, finding the right people. Showing out the right way, and people knew you, and they were like, damn, this guy, energetic. He makes me want to, do things. It makes me want to challenge myself. It makes me want to, challenge myself to be a better person, right? Because that's what you do. And your private life is probably a bit chaotic, but for you, you don't really give a fuck because, and this is why you don't give a fuck. Inside you, you're just like, I have to always be doing something, no matter what. So all this chaos and shit is actually helping you out. You like challenges, you like being pushed, you like being, opposed. That gives you a reason to exist, a reason to be in this existence, and show the fuck out, and that's what you do. you know, some people might get their feelings hurt, some people might actually get hurt, for real by you, but you don't care. You're always trying to, do things, challenge yourself, and you will not think things through fully. You'll worry about the consequences afterwards. Next person on the list is Taurus Mars in the fourth house. Taurus Mars in the fourth house. You might be lazy growing up, and mommy might have been like, "Hey, get out of bed. You gotta go to school. Hey, do your chores. You're good person, but today you're kind of fucking lazy, or you've been lazy for a while, and you gotta like get out of this funk, because like Taurus, this energy, it's a sign that is feeling, you know, because of what's going on in your environment, you feel some type of way. You know, you like the, you know, consistency, but sometimes you don't. See, this is Mars, right? So you do like to do shit, right? Your parents also, or your mom knew that you needed to do something that you didn't like to do, like teach you that you still have to do shit even when you don't want to do it. Because like when you don't want to do something, you just don't do it. You just sit there and you're like, you're just like out. Like you're just there and you're kind of like, not doing a damn thing, right? But if you like doing something, you would get up, you would be active, you would even like start to like, maybe get loud more and happy and more energetic. But if it was something that you didn't want to do, you would just be there and be like, oh my God, this is, I'm not feeling this shit. I'm not feeling this. But then like your mom was always there to like nip you that shit in the bud and be like, you still have to do it. There's things in life where, you gotta do some things and you don't want to do it. And you still gotta do it. So what this means is, you become an adult and you do start, doing things you don't like. And it's the things that, all people have to do. You know, you're not a person that people, they don't see you as a go-getter sometimes, but they know you're consistent about something. The people who are like your friends and shit, right? They know that you're consistent about something, and you also, patient about some shit. You know, getting what you want. You understand, everything's a fucking process when it comes to like other people and shit. But like that can also lead you to, procrastinate on some other things, and you're like, well, I should, do something, do something that you love, then, do something that will get you moving, get you, doing some fucking thing. You don't want to become fat. You don't want to become lazy towards, right? You want to be strong. You want to have muscles. You want to like command that type of presence and shit, right? You want to be fit, and you do like that kind of thing. Once you've like trained yourself or like, conditioned yourself to like that kind of thing, being physically active and other things, right? And you do like that. Your internal instincts work like, if I do this now and it fucks with me, it can fuck with me later down the line. My actions now basically dictate how my future is going to be. If it's something that's too, risky, you won't do it. Out of, you just don't want to do that to your future self. There's other things that can be done in this time that is, not more comfortable, but, will basically pay off in the long run. It's not about comfortability, because, you like to be comfortable. And like, that's the thing, when you have, yourself at your own home, you try to like, make it comfortable for yourself. But you also tell yourself, once you have this home, you're like, I can't stay here. If I stay at my house, this and that. But I also won't let some, stupid ass bitch, come here and try to, run my shit. Anybody, you are not taking my shit. I worked hard for my shit. This is mine. You will fight for your possessions. This is the shit that like, you fight about, you get loud about, and you're like, I've done this. I've, like, goddamn, this is not your shit. This is mine. Stay the fuck away. You know, go have your own fucking thing, right? You don't need my shit. Go the fuck over there. And you ain't even a person that's like, gloating about it or anything. You don't let people know what the fuck you have. The next person is Gemini Mars in the fourth house. So Gemini's Mars in the fourth house, they talk to people. They talk through shit with their parents growing up. But in talking shit through shit with their parents, it gave them an idea of, okay, what's good to do and what's not good to do. And then you got Beltask when you kind of like went against that, or you tried to dig for more information. Why can't I go to that party? You said I could go to the park, but I can't go to the party. So I can go to the park, but I can't go to the party. Why can't I go to the party? Da 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 da. And you're like, doing that, and you're just like wondering shit. You ain't necessarily doing it to be a, whatever, but they take it that way because you're supposed to respect your parents' authority as you're living in their house, so you got belt to ask for that, or something of that nature, right? Because some of us didn't, but I know I did. Um, but anyways, this person, you know, um, then when they're growing up, they try to find people who are like some kind of authority like that, or seem to have experience, seem to have a good head on their shoulders, and they ask them about how they should do things and other things. In doing this, though, they're basically going against their gut instincts, but also not, because that's how like a true Mars person would see it, right? You're going against your gut instinct, but that's what your gut instinct is, due to conditioning, and also, you always did kind of just think things through before doing something. If you know that it's gonna like not pay off in the long run, or you're not gonna get, or you feel as though, or not feel as though, you think as though this is not gonna play out in a desirable way, you're not gonna like entertain that. You're gonna go for the path of least resistance, and something that will get you the results you're looking for, not some shit that ain't. But in doing this, you might look like a more you know sporadic or overthinking kind of person. You overthink too much. You should just do something and don't think about it. But you will always think about it before you do it, which is not a bad thing, but it's also not a great thing when it comes to like you truly having Mars energy. The true Mars energy, I talk about that. That's Aries, that's Scorpio, that is Capricorn. But this person still can make shit happen for themselves. They know how to talk to people. That's the thing that's going to help you out the most. And who you want to talk to, and all that. You just gotta make sure you're on top of shit, and always also not like talking yourself out of doing stuff. You know, as long as you don't do that, you'll make sure you have fun too. But the next person is Cancer Mars in the fourth house. So Cancer Mars in the fourth house. This person, did things for their parents, did things with their parents. Their mommy. They love their mommy. Their mommy is kind of somebody they looked up to. Um, and they like love doing shit for their parents, and they kind of tried to like stick around. But at some point, these people had to grow up, and they had to get away from their family. That was a tragic time for this person, right? They're moved emotionally. These people were Cancer, Mars, right? And it's in a fall here. It's not in detriment, it's the fall. So that's like, weakest placement for Mars, right? This means that this person needs a supportive role. They want to, pour into somebody else. If they look at you, they like you, they care about you, they're important to you. So like now this person, right, who's left home and other things, they love their family, they love their mom and all that, right? They're, upset because they never been on their own before. In this time, it's like they're vulnerable and other things, right? So a lot of things can happen. They can pick a wrong relationship. They can pick a toxic relationship just out of, I need somebody there. I need to support somebody else, and I need somebody there. I want to be like my mom. I want to be a person who can, nurture and, cultivate a relationship that, is meaningful, and we can grow together. But as you stick with this person for a while, you find out that it is toxic, that it is something that you shouldn't have done in the first place. But that is not a bad thing. What I'm saying here is you now have wisdom. This is, there's these type of people, and then these type of people. Whereas somebody else wouldn't have done that, but you have a nurturing type of vibe to you. You're trying to like fix somebody. And, when you do that too much, right? You want to be the one to fix, make shit better, and then you want them to understand you. They ain't gonna understand you. They just like you because you do that. You pour into them, and you ain't getting shit out of it. The only thing, or you are getting something out of it. You're getting the, okay, they'll be there for me. Other people won't be there for me. And that allows you to stay in a relationship too long. You know, you get out of that relationship, you might find other relationships like that, or you lock the fuck in, and you ain't just hopping from relationship to relationship just because you feel safer in a relationship. You find the right relationship, which is, not just about, having fun. It's also about what you wanted to do the whole time: grow, build, and have a family with somebody. And that is what you want. You get that. You'll probably find that because people know that people use people and shit, right? And you're a person that doesn't need to be used per se, you know, used for fun, but not used for fun. You deserve to be, poured into as well. You know, like you need to have that back and forth. You need the conversation. You need to want to love being around those people. Not just sticking in a relationship because, oh well, it's a relationship and we're together, and I'm doing something for somebody, so it's good. You know, not just that. It's more than that, right? If you're looking for that long term thing. Now, if you're just trying to continue to do that, then by all means, you will understand, that type of, thing. If you just love toxic shit and you want to keep doing that, by all means, do that. But and you're trying to learn all of that, you know, and you can do that too, and still make a life. But it's you're hopping from people to people, not hopping, but running from people to people. When shit don't work, but it's like the same thing over and over because you keep trying to support these people who are, you know, just toxic, and not toxic like you think. I don't mean sexual. I mean, they like to beat your ass and other things, and that kind of thing. And that's not always sexual. That's, for the slightest shit, you just get slapped, slap, slap. But, you know, and you condition yourself to believe in shit like that, right? You don't need that. You need that in the, when you're fucking around in the background, right? When you're, fucking around with each other, having fun with each other, you need that. But when it comes to oh, we need to, do this, we gotta be good at money, understand that I'm gonna be at work. So, you gotta, take care of the house, do this, do that, and you would do that too, because that's what you ultimately want. But you thought you like that kind of thing, and you don't like that kind of thing. Some people do, and those people, I guess you will just have to, accept that, and I don't know, you make it work somehow too. It's just basically this person. This is the key here. They need to be in some kind of relationship and pouring into somebody else. Whether that person is toxic or not, they're gonna pour into them and make sure that they're all right. They might never receive in return if that shit's toxic, right? But if they don't, they'll still stick with it because they defer to that. Now the next person is, oh my God, the next person is Leo Mars. So the Leo Mars in the um Leo Mars in the fourth house, right? Leo Mars, you are a guy or a girl who, does the best of what they do. They put energy and passion into what they do, right? They make shit exciting for other people. You know, Other people like being around them. However, at times it can be like you're arrogant about what you do. I do this, I do that. You people are kind of lacking. I'm a this, I'm a this, I'm a that. I'm the best at it. I'm the this, and you're getting praised by your parents too. So if you're getting praised by your parents for doing well, you're gonna continue to do that kind of thing. You know, you might not have a great relationship with your siblings, but you have a great relationship with your mom. Who's proud that she has a son or daughter who's well off. They know how to present themselves to people. They're liked by everybody. You know, I don't have to worry about you when you leave the house. And then you leave the house. You create a kingdom for yourself, essentially. You create, your own palace. What I mean by that, you just got a house that is, extravagant. You have like Lambos, boats and shit like that. No, you don't have this shit right away. And you actually do understand it's gonna take some guts, some energy, some confidence, place. But you present yourself the right way. You're at the right place at the right time. You grind enough, and by the time of a certain time, you do have your own place, and you have your own place, and it's great. You're having people over. You know doing whatever makes you feel happy, or whatever, or whatever makes other people happy, as you probably put it. You know, you have that gut instinct too. You know, you could get aggressive at times, though, right? Because people try to challenge your throne. And that's like, you have a consistency about you. You show up all the time. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're doing, you try to show up all the time, and you do show up all the time. You might not even be a Leo, but when it comes to shit like that, and people like question like who you are, and like what you do, you get pissed off by that. You know what the fuck I do. You've seen what the fuck I've done. And you get sideways about that, and you get active on somebody. You start grabbing people up, but you also don't want to come off that way too much. Because like people see you, and you understand that, but you do have to do that shit sometimes, and you will do it. Next person on the list is Virgo Mars. So Virgo Mars, this person, right? They had childhood where they always listened to their parents. Whatever rules they had to follow, they followed them to a T, and they did it. They may ask questions a little bit. They got slapped once, or the belt once. They never had to get the belt again, because they knew that if I go against that, that's the consequences. You know, they followed what their parents told them to a fucking T. Then they became an adult. They had a routine set. These people follow a routine. They plan things out, and they do that. They do not really talk to people, though. They do, and they do like to do that, but they always make sure they find the right people to talk to, and at the right time in the right place. You know, Obviously, if I'm going to work out, I cannot do this with this person. I do certain things on certain day. Um, when there's a thing going on where you come and you disturb their routine, because they have been doing it for a while, and they don't need you like doing that, and you might know that they have that kind of routine, and you go in there anyway like a dickhead, and you try to fuck that up. They'll be upset, and they might attack you. They might get sideways. They might grab you up and hurt you, right? Because they told you that they specifically do this on this day and this day. And it ain't like you're approaching them saying, hey, you know, have you ever tried thinking about doing this or doing that? In your workout routine, or did you ever think about going to the gym at this time? And like convincing them through like logical conversation, and how they can like practically implement something else into their routine. They would listen to that. But if you're just being a dickhead for no reason, and you're like holding them up on some shit that they need to do, it's like part of what they do. Of course they're gonna get sideways. Of course they might do something. They might fight with you, but they never try to do that. They still try to use like some sense and other things. They're just like after I get this person off my dick, I have to go to do what I usually do. But they'll still be upset because why? Damn, they follow a routine, and it was fucking thrown off. But at the same time, they can then rewrite their routine a little bit, you know, revamp it, remix it to where they can properly go at the right time where people ain't finding their dick. They can just go to the gym and get out and do what they gotta do, not be there when idiots are around and shit like that, right? And again, this person doesn't hate a little bit of conversation about how they could do shit better and get critique themselves. They like that actually, but they don't care for stupidity getting in the way of what they got to do. So the next person is Libra Mars in the fourth house. So Libra Mars in the fourth house. This person thinks things through before they do it, right? You know they always been like that, right? um Passive aggressive. you know they don't like to disturb the peace that is there. you know Even if they themselves are not satisfied with what's going on, in order to keep the peace, they'll just keep their mouth shut, or think of basically and because this is what Libra Mars does, think of another way to make shit all right for everybody else. Put their shit on the side for later. Okay, in order for everything to be peaceful here now, I have to you know not do that shit that I wanted to do. I have to do it later. I can't do it now. I don't mind doing that, you know, but I still have to do something now, because they think things through. I still have to do something now, and I might as well do something that I, like to do. They'll have their little activities or whatever they do on the side that are not. It ain't so like dramatic, or like it's not gonna cause any real fucking chaos, and they'll do something else instead, right? Still having that in mind, though, they'll still have what they want to actually do in mind, but they won't actually implement it until the right time. They're not in that environment no more. They don't have to worry about other people's feelings because they think about other people's feelings before doing shit. You know, if I do this, they're gonna get sideways, so I won't do it. That kind of thing, and I would know because I'm like that a little bit. You know, they'll get sideways and da 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 da. They'll do this and do that if I do this, but also that's you talking yourself out of shit too. So like that's why it's that Libra is the detriment placement, or the yes, detriment placement for Mars. Not the worst placement to have, but not the best placement to have, because you're considering too much shit before you do stuff, and then that leads to like stagnation, and people could also call you like lazy, but you ain't being lazy. It ain't laziness. It's your thinking too much before you do shit. If you wanted to do something, you just gotta do it and not really worry about the consequences. You can figure that shit out afterwards. But that's just how like you're internally built. Your internal instincts tell you to like think about others before you do something. You know how that might impact them. Your actions impact them. You know my placement is kind of different though. So the Green Angel might do things a little differently. But anyways, um, and you always try to do that in the house, right? And um, it's not running away from conflict. It's quelling it essentially. Trying to bring a more peaceful conclusion to whatever the fuck chaos is going on. Trying to be a person who you know you put yourself aside, because like if you're going to create a lot of chaos with what you want to do, what you desire, what you want to do, and you're going to bring that onto other people, you're going to put that shit aside just so other people don't get sideways. But when you actually take those steps to do it, it's like they really never gave a fuck in the first place. Like you could have just did that, and they wouldn't have said shit. But you wouldn't know because you talk yourself out of it. You say shit like, if I do this, they're gonna, get upset. They won't see me in a way that I want to be, presented, right? They won't see me like that no more. They'll see me as this kind of person, this kind of person. You'll think all kind of shit before. But you don't do that. You should probably just, go through with it, do it, and whatever happens, happens. And explain yourself afterwards. But the next sign, Scorpio. Scorpio don't do that. Scorpio, Mars, they don't do that. See, these people, they'll do shit. They'll get their shit done, whatever they need done. So this is in the fourth house. So the past had a profound impact on. Typically it was chaotic and shit for these people, right? Who have Scorpio, Mars in the fourth house, right? Toxic family. You know, um, you know, maybe there was some abuse going on in the house. Maybe they got abused too. Um, Either way, they had to seek something that was consistent. Not just consistent, but also what they would enjoy having fun with. Because they never had that, you know. But also, they take from their past, right? Because this is a fixed sign. If they dwell on their past too much, they'll bring that to the present and they'll be like, okay, let me be toxic a little bit. Or not toxic. Let me try to find, that deeper connection. They'll fuck with people that they think are, willing to do what they need them to. But come to find out that they won't. But they'll be upset about it. They will be upset about it. Because I've seen it playing out, not this way, but you allowed yourself to disrespect what I was trying to, do for you. We don't like that. They hold grudges and shit. They do. So they don't like those kind of people anymore. They're trying to find, somebody, see, because this person, they have that go-getting attitude just like Aries. Except they don't have to be loud about it. And they also can tell beforehand if this type of thing is like, has the potential to work out or not. They do. They have that internal instinct, that intuitive nature about them, and that kind of sixth sense about themselves. Because they do it to themselves too. Some of them realize it, some of them don't. You know, and it's like they put so much like emphasis and energy because they have an intense energy about what they need, right? What they need, what they want, what they desire, and you can feel that when they like choose to like interact with you. Obviously, if they don't, then you won't know or anything, right? And they like that, and they like to bring a certain level of mystique to a relationship. You know, they build and silence and shit too. The actions speak for themselves. Either you know or you don't. But I don't give a fuck. I know what I can do, and I've done what I needed to. And maybe I've done things that well, others might say, is not a good thing, or a thing that is praiseworthy. But ultimately, I'll make sure I achieve my goals at whatever means necessary. This person's like that. You know, but you gotta remember about this person. They come from a chaotic past too, typically. Whether they created the chaos as a child or the environment created the chaos in that child, and instilled that in that child, that then they became an adult and they then, decided to, move that way, you know, and that's all they know. And they're trying to find that deeper connection out there somewhere, what they like, you know, and during this time, they'll find people that they know ain't like them just to like entertain that thought and see if they can like, get this person to like, do shit for them. But if, it don't work out, they still get upset because they understand that their time is gone these people and shit like that. So they'll be upset a little bit, but they continue to change with the times and shit like that, like everybody does, but always consistently looking for a deep connection with somebody. But when they find that, they don't let go of it. They hold on to that shit and they fight for it too. They do. Um, they'll fight for it, with their lives and shit. Much kind of how like Taurus is with their things and stuff. That's how they are with like you know the deep connections they have with the people they're trying to be best friends with, or you know good chill down bitch with, or because they like to fuck around too. They like to have fun. They like to have sex, right? But the next sign is Sagittarius, Mars in the fourth house. Sagittarius, Mars in the fourth house. These people had it in them, an innate, gut instinct to just do whatever, they wanted to, felt like doing. Loud, obnoxious, a little bit chaotic, whatever, right? They created that in the, family, whatever. They had back and forth with their parents. They were confident. They were, they liked being who they wanted to be. Now their family or their mom might have been like, you gotta like, not do that, but it's good that you see. They knew it was good that they were confident and they could speak up for themselves and they'd speak up for other people too, but not here and not now, that kind of thing. So they had to be children and listen to their parents. But when that time came, shit. But I'll say this about they were out there faster than the Aries and the Leo. They were like they tried to leave before they were 18. They tried to leave by the time they were 16. They were like, I got a car, I'm gone. And some of them fucking just did. And guess what? Their parents were worried about them and shit. But then they remembered this kid and they were like, they'll be all right. Because guess what? This person has it in them to be confident, tell people like it is. They have that honesty factor about them. And people, respect shit like that. Maybe not everyone, but some people do. And they knew that their child, this person, would still make it. Now, that doesn't mean what, you think it means. Making it doesn't mean that. It just means they know how to present themselves to people, talk to people, and they're, cool at doing things, getting shit started for themselves, right? If they have to like hurt somebody and keep somebody off their dick, they can do that. um this person's chaotic still in their um private time, right? What this means is they could be hopping from relationship to relationship. Jobs don't work out, and man, they're sleeping on friends couches and shit like that, and just doing that, you know and it's like, it worked like when they're with people, right? Because they want that. They want that connection with people. They want to experience life for what it has to offer them, right? But oh my God, they just like can't ever stick with something. They gotta try all kind of shit out. This didn't work out, so let me try this. This is gonna do it. Oh, I did something you didn't like. Oh shit, you know what, man? I'll just leave and I'll um you won't have to deal with me and all my shit, right? Because I'm a this and that, right? And you're also a, and they say some shit that's, kind of hurtful to the person that they were staying at somebody else's house and shit. But, eventually these people do get it together and so they figure out, what they like. And what they do is, instead of like hopping from this to that or running from this to that, they find something, right? And then they like learn everything about that, like every aspect of that. And like that makes them like a expert on that kind of thing. because they like hone in on one thing and then they like explore every. Because like before they were just like they would do it for some time and then leave, and they also like to fuck around too, right? Like with like people and stuff, right? And like I mean like sexual relationships and shit, right? But and they like to try all kind of shit out. They're down to explore all kind of things. Um, but eventually they do get that, But for a while it seems as though it's in their private life it's chaotic. They could be living with people or not living with people. They could be going through a time of like um, homelessness. They could be going through a time of you know not knowing when they'll get paid again. All kind of shit. But these people have a positive outlook on shit. That might be what it is now, but I'm always looking to try new things. I'll learn things. I will get myself out of this situation and stay positive about the future. Despite what, other people might think. I'm a failure, I'm a fool, whatever. I don't give a fuck. You know, and they definitely don't think before they do stuff. But they do it, and like they're never that person who, and these people in their guts, like they don't like people like this. No. I don't like people who are, the opposite of them and think about shit too much or whatever. And then but they don't even care because they're like doing like they're just living life, man. They don't give a fuck about, if they need to do this now, they're just gonna do it now. They ain't gonna wait. They're impatient. These people are impatient. But with Mars energy, that's fine. And it's not fine in that, everything, goes smoothly necessarily. But they'll take a chance and like they won't have that fear or anything that of doubt, you know. And sometimes it does just work out for them. Oh well, they had the guts to say this and be forward and attack attack that opportunity when nobody else wanted to. Well then that's why they have it and other people don't. That kind of thing. You know, but they do it all the time with like just everything they do, not just business deals or bitches, everything. That's why their private life is a little bit chaotic. You know, home is, I don't know, whatever they're trying to experience at any given time. And they know like where their home is, their mother and all that, right? They might go back and try to, bring her spirits up, right? And that in turn brings their spirits up because they know that they're, doing something positive for somebody else. But anyways, the next person, and they might not even be Sagittarius too, by the way. They might be something else. But like when they're like, trying to get shit done and move around, they don't really think too much. They do what they gotta do. And they follow their instincts for sure. The next person's Capricorn Mars though. This person's a go getter too. And it's like, they plan shit out a little bit, but when they do things, they know if they like, business, fuck around partners, all that shit, you know. They know how to manage, money, or they try to manage their money, you know. They can do anything essentially if you're a Capricorn Mars, because this is the exaltation point of Mars, right? You don't let shit slow you down, you know. Even if you're on bad times, there's always something. Basically, you tell yourself this: there's always something that I can do, no matter what. There's always something that I can do. I could work out. I can, you know, find bitches to fuck around with. I could find a career in something that, I'm knowledgeable in, and then learn everything that I have to do and do it. And it's not about being loud about what I do. It's just the actions speak for themselves. Once I start like making that money, once I start, having that car, I'm just there with it, and it's just what I've done. I've and like you were just a person who was always on the go and shit. I'm trying to, better myself so like I can do my mom proud. She took care of me. She did this, did that. I even, slide her some, things that I know she likes. Once I become and make it, she can have a car, she can have her own house and shit like that. And this person, makes sure they, get after it like that. And these people do that. It's like, but it's an internal instinct that they have. And shit. They just do it. They never really had to be told that. And then they also had that sense of respect for authority. And in turn, once they got a certain age, they became respected too because they had that, toughness about them, that grit. They like to initiate, practical action, whereas other people, want to like, shoot the shit or, you know, get loud about foolishness. They can tell you what actions need to be taken to achieve a goal and then do it, implement that immediately. You know, we don't give a fuck about, the hype. We don't give a fuck about this. We just do it no matter what. We might not feel good this day. We don't give a fuck. We're going to work. We're putting money in this spot to see it grow. We're doing all this shit, right? You know, and they have a system laid out to some degree, but it's like, it's not something that, like, what I'm saying is these people ain't gonna let like thinking too much slow them down. It's not even a thinking too much thing. It's simply, we have a simple plan that we follow and we follow through with it and we just make sure it fucking happens. And it's we is in me, not kind of like, and when I say we, I mean these people are good at like business and shit. So like they know how to talk to people, they know how to get the fucking point across, they know how to like, um, delegate, roles to other people, you know, and run shit smoothly, and they do know how to do that, you know, as long as they know said business or whatever, you know. And people will listen to them too because they have the fucking results to show it, right? It ain't like they're just saying this shit and they don't actually have, anything to show for it. They have shit to show for it. And if they don't have shit to show for it, they ain't gonna say shit. They're gonna, work and do that. So they can be that person that has, shit to say to people. Um but you know, they can be aggressive at times too. They can be, you know. Because them, it's like you're being disrespectful to them. You're saying, I don't know what the fuck's going on when I can see what the fuck's going on and I've been doing this shit. You're gonna tell the person who's actually a realist, actually, because like they don't do the like they do fuck around. They do, fuck bitches or fuck guys on the side, but they know how to like put that shit aside and get like their actual like things going, their money, their this, their that. But like it's also like this too with this person, right? Their business and their empire they're trying to build, whatever it is, that's their home. They're like living in the fucking business. Like they live at work, they live at the office and shit. These people do. They don't have like an emotional network. They're just like, I'm a worker, I'm a worker, I'm a worker. I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do this, I'll do that. Whatever I have to do to make sure my money's right. I'll send money to the, I'll invest in this, I'll invest in that. My mom can get, some of this money or whatever, you know, but they're always working and shit no matter what. And they don't allow other bullshit to, get on them. If they have to learn something about money so they can make more money, they'll do shit like that. It's like that in their private life. It's not like they're actually fucking around. They might even turn down fucking around to do shit like that. But they still gotta fuck around sometimes, and they would. Um, and that's the Capricorn Mars. So you could have like you could be an Aquarius with this placement. You could be a Sagittarius with this placement. You can even be a Scorpio or a Aries with this placement. Actually, no one Aries with this placement. But anyways, we got Aquarius Mars in the fourth house. So Aquarius Mars, this person likes to think through things right before they do it, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But they find the right people to um, bounce ideas off of before they implement an idea. They have an idea in their head and they want to do something, but then they have to like verify or, what would you do? How would you go about doing this? And like it ain't like they're gonna do what said person. They ask people who are like similar or whatever. What would you do in this situation? Da 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 da. And then they're like, okay, and you know, they decide. They either talk themselves out of it because of what some other people have told them, or they decide to do it because of what other people told them. Rarely ever do they like just do something and not think things through before doing it. They don't like to be seen as foolish, but they also like to be seen as competent and able to talk and communicate with people. Get their point across in a logical, respectful way. Um, and like they will do shit and out of like unpredictably at times though, like they actually might not think about things going into something like a couple of times, but it's not for what you think because they want to see how you react to something. So like they'll do something out of the blue that's like you didn't think they would do something like that, but they did. They do shit like that. They try to be unpredictable with their movements, you know. But it's still like something within them that they have planned out. Trust that, um, or know that they planned that to be unpredictable at times. So like people ain't on their dick, or like, okay, you thought I was gonna do this, but I'm actually doing this, you know. And like it still works out for them because they know how to talk, they know how to get their points across to people, and it's not like they're just doing something that is um, not going to benefit them in the long run. They'll do shit that benefits them. It ain't gonna do that. You could be a Pisces with displacement. You could be a goddamn. You can be a but they also like talk to their parents a little bit before trying shit a little bit, or like presented ideas. They would do shit like that to their parents to be unpredictable and stuff, you know because like they're used to their son or daughter presenting this to them and saying this before they do something, but then they just do it. So like they just go to the party. They don't say shit, they just go to the party. But they were telling their parents, this and that and this and that beforehand. If I go to the party this weekend, da 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 da, and they're saying shit, and then they're like, parents say no and all that, right? And then they still do it. Now they understand that they shouldn't have done that, and then they get back and they get the punishment or whatever. But they learn about themselves that they have that unpredictable nature about themselves, and they like to like fuck with people like that. They like to fuck with people like that with the way they move. It's not necessarily in silence. It's just you thought I was hanging out with these people, but I'm actually hanging out with these people. Um, I'm not unmotivated. I'm motivated by my mind, and I like to move people and like kind of fuck with their heads a little bit the way I do things. You know, to also see if like they are also able to handle that. Oh, like so I did something that you weren't expecting. Are you gonna like crumble under pressure? Or are you gonna be like, okay, I wasn't expecting that, but damn, you did something that I didn't think you were capable of. You know, and then they find out the truth about people that way because they say shit like that. They're like, "Oh, I didn't expect you to actually do something like that." You know. But anyways, the next and last sign is Pisces Mars in the fourth house. Pisces Mars in the fourth house. This person, oh my God, this person likes to, find a relationship too. So this person, grew up in a house that was, full of love and care, right? But they internalize things. They don't always tell people what they're doing. And the actions, kind of, with this person, the actions speak for themselves. Um, and they like to explore as well. Kind of like the Sagittarius, but they do it in a more subtle way, right? And when they do these things, you know, they might regret it, but they usually don't because, where other people didn't have the balls to do something, right? You know, take a chance on something or whatever. I did. And I learned from that. I learned from that. I learned what I liked. I learned what I didn't like. And I have that, moving forward over people, right? So this person moves with like a sense of like some wisdom, right? The wisdom that they got from this life. I felt like I wanted to do this. I did it then. I didn't let shit slow me down. Um, I also played, a more sneaky role than a Sagittarius does. But that don't mean that, they got off like again, you know, they have an intuitive nature about them too. So they know before doing something if it's gonna, make them feel, you know, um, hurt or negative afterwards or whatever. But sometimes they just go against that feeling. They're like, maybe I'm just feeling that right now, and it's actually helps me in ways that I didn't know. And sometimes it does do that, but sometimes it's just that. They fuck themselves up, but they learn from it and they keep doing things. They don't let that slow them down. I'm always gonna try something new. I'm down to be in relationships with people. You know, they like flings and they like doing things like that, right? These people have Pisces Mars. You know, they oh my God, they love their mothers too, and they talk well about them, and they do things for their mother too. They're the type of people who would also give things for their mother on like Mother's Day and shit like that. You know, if they're a guy, bitches like them. If they're um, female, guys like them. They have like many sexual partners. And like they have their experience in that way. But they also have experience in other ways. They might have had many jobs where they get the most out of the jobs that they have, and they like know the ins and outs of it, to a great degree, and then they're a person of like experience, and then you can come to them and they can tell you all kind of shit about what they have done in that career field or whatever. But when it comes to their private life, right? Because this is the fourth house, right? Um, this person wants to have that kind of like anchor there, in their life. They want to have, they want to have like they like relationships. They do. So like they want to, have that support system. They want to, back and forth, kind of like the Cancer and Scorpio. I want that, need that, I can have that. They're positive about that. They know they can have that. They know that they make people feel a certain way with their presence. They come in as that. They try to be like a savior too. I always bring that up with Pisces and shit. They try to be like a savior, hero, try to be Mr. or Mrs. Hero, come in there and do that, and when it works for them, sometimes it don't. But they be able to pull that off, and um, have people see shit, that way, and they make their partners feel good and all that, in them. They just need to, um, and then when it comes to like other people, they innately know what makes them move, and what makes them tick, because they've done so much stuff, that they've experienced so much shit. They have balls. They're able to like go out and just do things. You know, now they try to some of them try to not get on people's bad side, and still they still get what they need. You know, they're creative about how they go about convincing people. They're very persuasive. These people are. That's what it is. They're very persuasive about getting what they want. They typically do. Um, but yeah, these people, I like that. With that all being said, this is the Mars in the fourth house, episode. But be cool, call on the corner, and the natal readings are now $200. When you find me, right? Um, be cool, call on the corner, and be here next week for the Jupiter placement in the fourth house.